Hello and welcome to a very special session that we have specially curated for you. We're going to start in just a minute, and while we wait, get yourself comfortable, go ahead and cast this onto your smart TVs, and don't forget, for the best experience, full screen headphones are always recommended. We're going to begin in just a minute. Please stay with us. Good morning and a very happy International Women's Day to each and every one of you who've logged in today. My name is Darius, and on behalf of Accenture, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to what's going to be an inspiring and invigorating conversation with some wonderful people. But before we begin, there are a couple of quick announcements to make. Firstly, make sure you visit the resource center that is on this platform. We've got some exciting content on culture makers and accelerating gender equality. Also, don't forget to click your photos at the virtual photo booth and upload those photos onto your social media channels. And when you're doing that, don't forget to use the hashtags. There's a hashtag IWD 2021, that's International Women's Day 2021. And also use the hashtag Let There Be Change. Because that is something that we really want. Change. Today, we are going to listen to those voices of change, the ones who have made a difference, who continue to make a difference. We're going to talk about why India needs its women to work. We're going to figure out how we can break barriers that hinder equitable growth. We're going to try and make out how we need to weed out gender bias at the workplace. Welcome to the virtual celebration of International Women's Day. Now, women reportedly contribute 1/6 of economic output in India, and that is amongst the lowest shares in the world. This untapped potential of women is one of the reasons why India remains poor. Yet, far from joining the labor force, women have actually been falling away at an alarming pace. The female employment rate in India, counting both the formal and informal economies, has dropped. In 2005, we were at an already very low 35%, and today, 15 years later, it's dropped further to 26%. And in the same time, the economy has more than doubled in size, and the number of working age women has grown by a quarter to 470 million. Yet, nearly 10 million fewer women are in jobs. So, what exactly is the push that we need? I can't answer that question. So to shed more light on this, I'd like to invite three bold and brilliant women who have challenged the status quo and forged ahead. Please, put your hands together for Meenu Shekhar, senior business journalist, editorial consultant, writer, former deputy editor of the business magazine at Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania. She's worked with leading publications such as Knowledge at Wharton, Business World, Business India, and the Straits Times. Also, please welcome Vasanthi Srinivasan, professor at IIM Bengaluru, and Shailaja Bhagwatula, MD, Avanade and AMBG lead, Accenture Advanced Technology Centers, and inclusion and diversity sponsor at Accenture India.
Hello and welcome to our International Women's Day discussion on accelerating gender equality for all and why it is more important now than ever before. And to put this in context, if we look at the past year, it has been tough. It has been very tough for all of us. The corona pandemic has really wreaked havoc on the socio-economic fabric of every country across the world, and each one of us has been impacted in some way or the other. But then, when we look back, we find that women have really borne the brunt of it. And it is not as if the virus has discriminated on the basis of gender, but society certainly has. So if you take online education, for instance, or if you take healthcare services, we find that women have far less access to these that men do. And if we look at India in particular, even before the pandemic, the gender-based disparities were far higher in the country than in many other regions around the world. So take economic output, for instance. Indian women contribute around 18% to the country's economic output. That's half the global average. Or if you look at gender-based gaps in wage earnings, the global average is around 16%. And in India, women earn 35% less than men do. That's a huge... and as we now pick up the pieces, towards going forward, as we now pick up the pieces towards economic recovery, what stands out, one thing that's very, very important is that unless women participate fully and equitably in the economic recovery, we are not going to see a fast recovery. We are not going to see the best possible recovery. And it's extremely important that we all realize that women's participation is extremely crucial. And remember, speed is really of the essence here. According to a study by Accenture and Women 20, unless we act very fast, our path to gender-based equality will be set back by 50 years. That's a huge time period, and we really need to get cracking on it. So discuss these and some other issues. I have with me Vasanthi Srinivasan and Shailaja Bhagwatula. Vasanthi is Professor of Organizational Behavior and Human Resources Management at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. And Shailaja is Managing Director and Inclusion and Diversity Sponsor at Accenture India. Vasanthi and Shailaja, thank you so much for being here with us today and for sharing your views and insights on these very, very critical issues.
Thank you, Meenu, and such a pleasure always to be on this forum for Accenture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Likewise, such a pleasure. And, this is a very, very important agenda for us. So thanks, Meenu and Vasanthi. It's great to be having this conversation.
Great. So Vasanthi, I'd like to start off with you. Give us a sense of why you think that now more than ever before, now that we've seen the pandemic, it's been over a year, now more than ever before, it is critical that we accelerate gender equality.
Yeah.
And why?
Thank you, Meenu. I think if there is the number one priority for us as a country, like just looking at this data that you provided earlier, I think gender equality is something that all of us need to focus on, immaterial of where we are in the country. And let me just begin by looking at the impact of COVID across different spectrum of women. Yeah. So you have women in the informal economy who actually were the backbone of the economy earlier, who've now had to go back due to childcare and other responsibilities, and many of them just lost their jobs. Then there are women in the formal economy, and we do know that women have always done a double shift. And I think what the pandemic has shown is that it's just got worse. So given that schools were closed and given that other institutions were not open either, I think a lot of women ended up just dropping out of the workforce. And maybe it's only the years from now that we will actually be able to see the reality of what has actually happened. And last but not the least, women who were in part-time employment, flexi employment, they have been impacted because many of them have just lost jobs. So all in all, if you look at it, it hasn't left any strata of society unaffected, any kind of women across the board unaffected. And it's at this scale and magnitude that really India needs to sit up to be able to ask what more we can do about it.
Right. And Shailija, if we look, even prior to the pandemic, if we look at, let's say, the past 15 years from 2005 onwards or so, we look at the fact that India's economy has more than doubled. The number of women in the working age population has increased, I think, by almost 25%. But the pace at which women have joined the workforce, that hasn't kept pace. In fact, it has actually reduced. We have lesser number of women now in the workforce than we did earlier. Could you share a corporate perspective on this?
Sure. Unfortunately, it is actually true that the number of working women has really not kept pace with the growing economy and the opportunity. And while there is some acknowledgement and also some effort being made by corporates, it seems like, first of all, the effort is only in pockets and is not a consistent thing across all corporations. And it's limited to certain sectors, maybe, more organized sectors, and then so that to more technology sectors, but it's not prevalent across. And also, we need to resort to some different approaches which have probably not been looked at. And if I look at some of the underlying causes for this, and I can quote from our Accenture research done last year, where we covered multiple corporations across the world, covering about 30,000 people. It has brought out some interesting facts that, one, there is a big perception gap between what leadership envisages and what is the employee experience on the ground, right? And the data shows that while 2/3 of the leaders are actually feeling that they're creating empowering environments, when we actually go to the employee and say that, are they able to really innovate without fear of failure? Are they able to raise their concerns? Or do they have a voice at the table? Only 36% of employees actually feel that. So there's that perception gap. The other thing is that, about a third of, more than third of the leaders, say that employees have a good control over how they work, when they work, etc. But only 1/3 of the employees actually agree to that, right? So there is that gap too. Now, the other aspect in corporates is a big thing around culture. When we looked at public statements, this thing around culture, there is a lot of increased reference to it over the past decade. However, when we talk about leadership and when companies really addressed culture in their statements publicly, it is very, very minimal, right? Now, if you look at corporates, the problem gets only magnified when we are looking at leadership and things like women at the top. One statistic says that it's only 2.8% of the Fortune 500 companies where there is a women CEO. Likewise, if you look at startups, just 1 in 5 startups is by a women founder. And if you also look at back home in India, there was this article by Mint, I think, which said that despite there was a gender quota which got introduced in the Companies Act, which actually mandated most companies to appoint more women in boards, but majority of firms have really not gone beyond the basic requirements, right? So it is true that even pre-pandemic, there are all these gaps existing.
Yeah, I'd in fact come to the leadership question a little later, but just to get back, to the crisis at hand and what this has really done. Vasanthi, any suggestions from you on how we can turn this crisis into an opportunity? For two, one, to create an awareness that women need to be equal partners in economic activity, and two, to make it happen.
I think the first thing, Meenu, that the pandemic has done is shown all of us that women did carry a large amount of household care. Okay. We knew that, but for the first time, it's documented, it's spoken about because men stayed at home. Yeah. And they realized what it means to do care. So to that extent, I think that men as allies, this is the time to actually begin to do something about it. And it has to be a public campaign to be able to make sure that men recognize and actually engage with their household chores. And it's, I think, a public policy issue for India rather than a gender issue for women. I think that's the first big one in terms of policies. I think beyond that, we really need to come back after the pandemic and put care facilities, especially childcare, elder care, institutional care, whatever it is that needs to be done. I think we need to focus on that, and substantive investments both from the private sector needs to go there in terms of ensuring that when women are returning to work, they don't have to worry as much about the time that they are going to spend. The third one, and I'm now beginning to see, we need mentoring and coaching of women leaders at scale. And I'm so delighted that Shailaja spoke about leadership intent to leadership practice and perceptions of practice. I've heard the word mentoring used so much, but really, how do we actually translate it in terms of women experiencing that they were mentored? And last but not the least, Meenu, and I'm going to stop here, is just that we knew even before the pandemic that formal investments by women on their careers and career development has always been a struggle. And typically when women, high potential women, have had to engage with this, they have usually made trade-offs on their health, delaying children. Okay, we knew that before the pandemic. And I think one of the biggest challenges during the pandemic and post-pandemic is actually going to go back and pick up your learning agility. Yeah. And to my mind, learning agility is transformatory for a post-COVID world. I think we need to do all of that and much more.
All great points, Vasanthi. And I'd like to come back to an earlier issue that you've always highlighted about the career identities, and how you've said how important it is for women to develop career identities. Is it possible now for women, and how is it possible now for women to leverage this crisis, to reflect on their career identities and to really strengthen it further?
Yeah, I have three thoughts on it, Meenu. The first one is that I think we need to build career identity very young among our girl children in schools. So post-pandemic, probably we should start asking our school girls in the 7th and 8th standard, what do you aspire to be? What do you want to be? Yeah, I think that's where we need to begin. For those women at workplace, I think COVID has made them ask some fundamental questions about themselves. And I do believe crisis is a great point either to strengthen your identity or to break your identity. Yeah. So my real worry is that while a lot of women professionals, their career identities would have got strengthened, one of the challenges is also that COVID has put us, could be in some kind of an aspiration deficit. Okay. Because the external environment has put me under so much pressure that I'm basically saying, gosh, just holding on is taking so much of me that where is the time to aspire? Yeah. And that is something that I would really urge every single woman who's watching us on this panel to just keep that in mind, that this epidemic, the pandemic, is a once in a lifetime occurrence. And that builds resilience. Yeah. And therefore, to those women who are watching us, just be resilient. This too shall pass. But most importantly, I think aspire, because pandemic has thrown so many opportunities, which I think they should just pick on and run with it.
Thanks, Vasanthi. Shailaja, you were talking about the corporate world earlier. And again, to get back, we spoke about the last 15 years, how it has panned out in the corporate world. When you look at the year of the pandemic itself, like we said, there is absolutely no doubt that women have had, been impacted disproportionately. Again, during the period of the pandemic, give us a sense of how it has been in the corporate world, and therefore why again, it is so important that we talk about gender equality with an absolute renewed push.
Sure. Yes. And again, very true that there's been a disproportionate impact of the pandemic on women, and some of the realities on the ground that women are actually shouldering a major burden of all of the hardships which are caused by both the economic and the health crisis. Women are having to spend more time on childcare and balancing of work. Mental health has taken a big toll. I mean, there are so many articles saying that half of the women say that levels of tension and stress in their households are very, very, very high, because it's that burden of how do you manage your household responsibilities. And there are also cases of actually domestic violence being reported, right? And women earnings have also dropped by about, apparently declined by about 2/3. And again, various reasons. I think one thing is that the industries which employ more women, typically hospitality, travel, tourism, etc., have got badly hit by the pandemic. Many women have had to move to more part-time roles, and some women also have to give up their jobs. And then female entrepreneurship has also taken a big impact. Now, on one side, well, these are all the kind of negative impacts. What I also see is that there are a lot of new opportunities, and these opportunities were probably there but hidden a little bit in the past. But COVID has really accelerated. So a couple of things are digital acceleration, right? And technology being at the forefront of everything we do in our lives today. So today we are living in a world where, technology matters the most. We can't think of either companies or individuals, consumers, without anything without technology, right? Be it retail moving online, contactless payment services, telemedicine, all the conference calls we are doing, which is all virtual and leveraging technology. And on the other hand, all the celebrations, engagement events, everything also moving to online. On the other hand, also consumer behaviors and consumer buying patterns have changed, and they've all moved to digital commerce, right? An interesting article from Peter Hinson, which I was just going through a couple of days back, is in the past, he makes this interesting analogy where he says, in the past, we used to go to the street and shop and come back home for a coffee. Today, we are actually sitting home and shopping and would love to go out to Starbucks for a coffee, right? So that's how much the world has changed for us.
Yeah.
That's all new opportunities. Remote working is a new opportunity. Remote working has actually opened up opportunities for women, of course, for men and women, but more so for women to actually sit in any part of the world, literally, and be able to still take on the opportunity, right? So from an organization and a corporate standpoint, I think this is really looking at a complete new way of thinking. The opportunity exists because we, for example, in our own company, we are seeing unprecedented demand for new technology work, right? So the opportunity exists. This is the right time that organizations should consciously say that we will, really embrace this agenda of equality, really bring in more gender neutral and gender equal policies and processes, and also tap into this women pool, which was untapped earlier on. Because now we are moving into more of a remote and gig economy.
Yeah,
so that's right.
Yeah. Meenu, I want to just add one thing.
Yes, please,
I just couldn't resist. What Shailaja said, there was something several months ago, I wrote an article on the virtues of a virtual workplace. Okay. Mm-hmm. And what Shailaja said is so true, Meenu. The people who've actually benefited from the remote work, and we should not take that credit away, are women, introverted men, silent people who couldn't articulate very well and present and network themselves, self-directed people who didn't have confidence. So all of these groups, and on many of these adjectives would be used on women earlier. Yeah. So in a way, I think Shailaja, it was very good that you reminded that people have benefited, and it's those people women who have benefited immensely. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, absolutely no, absolutely. I think both of you have got bang on all the points. I just want to add one more, talk about one more aspect of this, and that is women at the policy making level. Right, we've spoken about why it is important to accelerate gender equality and the opportunities and the challenges. But here I would like to touch about women at the policy making level. And especially in the context of the COVID, if we look at the task forces that have been formed or the response teams that have been set up throughout the world, right? Not just in India, throughout the world, we find there is a sharp gender imbalance. Women are grossly underrepresented. So obviously the impact of this is that the policies for women are not being made by women, and that has its own limitations. The question here is, how do we overcome these structural challenges so that for the next crisis that we have, or the next situation that we have, we don't have the same imbalance at hand. Vasanthi, your thoughts on this?
I think, Minu, the one way to look at this is that when you are in a crisis, you tend to fall back on your existing networks. And that, I think, is human, Minu. So I think what has been the first response across the world to this staggering uncertainty has just been withdrawal into what I'm comfortable, the people I know. And therefore, I think the point about networks that we were talking about earlier, just when the world was expanding and networks, more and more male leaders were looking at more inclusive networks, I think suddenly this crisis has just taken them back to their old networks. Okay, the way I think this will happen is the post, as I'm now beginning to see, I see more women engaging across. Okay, so probably the fact that you are asking this question, Minu, and we are reflecting on it, and I hope that the men who are listening to this will also get a little bit to reflect on saying, is this what I did? And maybe that is the process that will hopefully teach us that the next time we need to be more inclusive. Yeah.
Right. And you spoke earlier about men as allies. I think that was that runs through all the themes that we are talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Shalija, you did touch upon the leadership aspect earlier in your conversation. Again, just to go back to that, in the corporate world too, at the leadership level, we have very few women. Your thoughts on that, why that is the case, and two, what can we really do about it?
Sure. Coming to women in leadership, right? I think today, first of all, the pure numbers, show that there is a big gap. On the other hand, it also shows that just improving numbers itself will not do the job, but we actually have to fix the culture. We have to create that empowering environment where women really feel that they are included and they are being given the right opportunities, the right roles, and they are able to really thrive in their careers. So to me, while fixing the basic hygiene around acknowledging the problem, opening up these new opportunities for women and getting in the numbers up, on the other hand, there is this whole aspect of how do you address that culture and how do you create a more empowering environment where women really feel that they are included, right? And to me, if I also extend that to generally how we have to look at it at the world at large, including corporates, it is really breaking the stereotypes around women can play bigger roles both in households as well as at their work. And I believe we have to do a lot of public campaigns to really bridge this gap and create that awareness, also giving more women voices.
This is a topic I think we can talk about endlessly, but given the time constraints, I will just ask you any final thoughts from both of you on, again, touching the same topic that we are discussing here, that why is it more important now than ever before? Any final thoughts on that to push for gender equality, accelerating gender equality for all? Vasanthi?
Yeah. I think social transformation and reconstruction is what is the agenda of the hour. And in that reconstruction, I want to leave a thought that each one of the women in the country play a significant part in the roles that they play. And in Reconstruction, World War II taught us that women could be powerful. World War II shaped women's participation in the workforce. I do believe that the pandemic is offering that same opportunity for women to kind of show and how they can shape the world. And that's why it's important.
And we really need to grab this opportunity.
Yeah.
Shailaja, your final thoughts on this?
Sure. Coming to women in leadership, right? I think today, first of all, the pure numbers, show that there is a big gap. On the other hand, it also shows that just improving numbers itself will not do the job, but we actually have to fix the culture. We have to create that empowering environment where women really feel that they are included and they are being given the right opportunities, the right roles, and they are able to really thrive in their careers. So to me, while fixing the basic hygiene around acknowledging the problem, opening up these new opportunities for women and getting in the numbers up, on the other hand, there is this whole aspect of how do you address that culture and how do you create a more empowering environment where women really feel that they are included, right? And to me, if I also extend that to generally how we have to look at it at the world at large, including corporates, it is really breaking the stereotypes around how women can play bigger roles both in households as well as at their work. And I believe we have to do a lot of public campaigns to really bridge this gap and create that awareness, also giving more women voices.
No, absolutely. I think you both got it bang on, that the COVID has really made it imperative that we push forward our agenda and the intent behind it. I think once the intent is there, things definitely tend to move much faster. Thanks Vasanti, and thank you Shailaja. Thank you both so much for being here with us today and for sharing your insights, and I'm sure our audiences would have great takeaways from our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
We all agree. India needs its women to work, and we must build an inclusive workplace where women thrive. Which brings us to our next session. Now, Albert Einstein is widely credited with saying, we're not sure, #find your own truth, but we've all heard the phrase, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And when it comes to statistics of women in the workforce in India, and those numbers are dwindling at a very fast pace, there cannot be a more appropriate aphorism. It is time to reimagine gender equality measures undertaken up to this time. It is important to empower women for the sake of her rights and our rights, because the benefits of empowering women extend beyond the workplace to communities. Adding a senior woman in management is known to increase profits by 8%. It's also reported that women invest more of their earnings towards children's nutrition and education and health, which is something all of us should be doing. One of the greatest advantages of gender empowerment is individuals shedding biases which hold other people and their own growth back. To speak about how we can break these barriers, I'd like to invite Dr. Soundarya Rajesh, founder and president of Avatar, along with Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, Joint MD Apollo Hospital Enterprises, and Rekha Menon, Senior Managing Director and Chairperson at Accenture India.
A fantastic International Women's Day to all of you gorgeous men and women out there. It's fabulous to connect with two amazing thought leaders on this day. I have with me Rekha Menon of Accenture and Dr. Sangeeta Reddy of Apollo Hospitals in a freewheeling chat in which we're going to talk about everything that influences women's careers in this beautiful country of ours. Rekha and Sangeeta, welcome to the show, and it's absolutely fantastic having you both with me.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you.
Pleasure,
I'm going to start off.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Fabulous to have you both with me over here. This decade, the 2020s, is supposed to be a decade when over 1 billion women are supposed to be entering into the workplace. Now, that's a big number. But it also means that there are going to be more challenges, there are going to be more possibilities, it is going to be a mixed bag. Now, there is something, though, that we have to keep in mind. In most developed economies, more married women, more women with children are actually working as compared to single women. And this is something that in India actually goes against the grain. In India, marriage and maternity are key derailers to women's careers. So, Sangeeta, in this context, my first question is to you, especially since you are part of an organization like FICCI, where you are influencing policy by the Indian government. Enhancing women's workforce participation is actually a route to development that India has never really focused on. What are your thoughts about it, and what do you think should be done?
So I won't say that India hasn't focused on it, but I will say that there's a lot more to be done. And because you raised the reference to FICCI, actually for the first time last year, FICCI and Flow got together to create a new unique initiative called the Greater 50%. And as part of that Greater 50%, Women in the Workplace is one of the initiatives. We also have, empowering women who are marginalized. We have STEM education. We have women on boards. So there are various initiatives. But in the corporate, I think there's a range of things to be done, which, from empowering the environment itself. So, are you friendly towards women who have, challenges at home, who need support? So, government has put in things like you must have a creche, rules like that ages ago. But who really has or who is implementing these kind of things? So we did this quick checklist and turned the thing to say it's an organizational sensitization to inclusive workplaces. And we're working with individual HR and senior leaderships to say just understand what is required. And the positive impact of doing it is going to be quite fantastic. So we're on the job.
Great. No, absolutely. And with you at the helm of things, Sangeeta, I'm sure there is going to be a huge change that, researchers and social entrepreneurs like me who are hoping to see a big delta in women's workforce participation will actually enjoy seeing it. Rekha.
Can I add to what Sangeeta just said?
Yes, Rekha, please go ahead.
Because she's absolutely right. I mean, in terms of there is already things in place and more needs to be done. But I think, it has to be an entire ecosystem that has to come together. It's governments, it's individuals, it's corporates that have to commit to equality and then put enabling things in place. And it's also the women themselves, actually.
Oh, yes.
Have to then raise their hands and make the difference. So
absolutely.
So a full ecosystem that has to happen.
Completely, Rekha. And in fact, you know what? I'm going to ask you my next question. And in fact, I remember having a conversation with the head of HR of Accenture. I think it must have been 2006 or 7. And, we were talking about creating Vahini. And subsequently, I remember every year there has been a goal that Accenture worked towards. And till today, Accenture has actually steadily held its place among the top 10 best companies of the Working Mother and Avatar Best Companies for Women in India initiative. It couldn't have been done without concerted effort, and it couldn't have been done without facing a fair share of challenges. And here, I'm going to bring you to the very recent challenge that we faced, which was the pandemic. And I'm wondering, Rekha, how did Accenture manage this? I mean, the pandemic has actually just changed status quo. It has reshaped industries. It has changed lives. Do you think that the pandemic actually created more opportunities for women? What's your thought on that?
The pandemic. I mean, let's respond to the pandemic because that's a broader question. So you're absolutely right. It has changed status quo. It has reshaped industries. It has changed lives. But it has also created, I think, big opportunities for women, right? Because it's given us an opportunity really to set both at the individual level, but also at the societal level and at the government level, right? So one, from my industry, for example, if you see the adoption of digital technologies has accelerated completely. And every organization is now a digital organization. I know Sangeeta is very much at the helm of putting that in follow, right?
Yes.
With that, that means that just take that as one opportunity for women where either digital skills or they get new opportunities and new businesses and new industries that have emerged because of the pandemic, right? So they can either be beneficiaries of that or they can be creators of new businesses.
Oh, okay.
Right? They can either digitally skill themselves and or upskill themselves in the technology world and get these new opportunities that have emerged. The other thing that's happened is we all know that the geographic barriers have gone, right? Because of the pandemic, we all realize that geographic barriers don't exist anymore. And as a result, now women from different tier 2, tier 3 cities, etc., have a chance to participate in the socio-economic progress of the country. So that's the other big shift that's happened. So all three things I think are positive for women, right? Whether it's the adoption of digital technologies, new services and new businesses that have emerged, and the breaking of geographic barriers. And so it is an opportunity.
Absolutely. I'm just going to go back to what Sangeeta mentioned, as one of the ways in which this movement towards better women's workforce participation is actually being propelled. And that is through sensitization of organizations. And I loved that. And I'll tell you why. If you had started studying women's workforce participation in India in the 90s, as I did, I would say you were at the right place at the right time, because there was jaw-dropping increase in the number of women in their educational attainment. You had more women, graduating out of engineering colleges, computer science courses, medicine, law, management, you name it, and women were graduating in large numbers. But at the same time, there was also a completely contradictory drop in women's workforce participation, which was up before that at around the mid-30s, and then slowly it has now come to about 24% post-pandemic number. And here I'm, also referring to what Rekha said, which is, the women themselves also have to be very oriented towards pursuing that career with intentionality. Sangeeta, in your opinion, when you look at managing women's careers, I think it requires a lot of community and family support. Do you think there is a way of institutionalizing this support? Do you think that's possible?
So honestly, anything is possible if the goal is large enough and if the commitment is large enough.
Okay.
And I think there are always multiple roads leading towards this very powerful goal. And the goal is clearly an inclusive society. McKinsey has done amazing studies in terms of the impact, the financial impact of enhancing women's participation in the workplace, even by 10%, can lead to multi-billion-dollar enhancement to GDP. So let's first get this clear that this is something that needs to be done. The second point is that we have to look at it at multi-dimensional level. That it's, like Rekha said earlier, it's the woman, it's her family, it's society, it's the corporate, it's government, it's all together. And once we've put that framework in place, whether you have a community taking care of large housing societies now doing creches for babies because you're going to feel happier having the baby right there, or do they come into the workplace? How do we create less of unitized homes and really appreciate the role of elderly parents in taking care of children? How do we celebrate the fact that fathers are fantastic caregivers as well? And, remove social stigmas and bias. So there are hundreds of things towards that. I don't think it's a single solution type environment. The biggest thing is that we all acknowledge it's important. It needs to be done for the sake of not just equalization and inclusion, but really for a better and a more holistic society at large. The GDP will happen, but it's just a more, a better society that brings the power of the women into the workplace, because the consequences of not having a woman in a workplace or in equal, inclusive societies are multiple. They then lead to all the negative effects of being downtrodden, of women abuse. All those things definitely are less in an environment or a society where women are equal. So having agreed that it's everybody's job, it's an important thing to be done,
Yes.
and that we can make progress in many ways.
Absolutely, that was beautiful. We do a lot of studies. We, meaning Avatar, in my organization, we work a lot in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're constantly researching, constantly seeking answers. And one of the latest studies that we're embarking upon actually proves that when you have in an organization diversity in the form of varied representations of different strands of people, cultural, sexual orientation, gender, age, generation, all of these things, that is diversity. And then you have inclusion, which is the beautiful culture, the set of behaviors that each of these organizations inculcate, which actually creates that sense of belongingness. And then you have equity, which is nothing but customized enablers that you provide to each individual to be able to forget whatever lacks of the past and be able to rise up to the fullest of their potential. When people ask us what are the benefits of these three things together, diversity, equity, inclusion, finally I'm actually just telling them, there's multiple researches around what it does, but I'm just saying, you sleep well at night, you're happy. That's just what I'm now saying. That's just what I'm telling people now, because there are so many benefits, like you said, Sangeeta. In terms
I
of
agree. Soundarya, I use a very simplistic framework as well. The DEI is a very important aspect, but I basically say that it's a complex world, and we all have a difficult journey as society, traversing the change, the environment, everything.
Oh, yes.
And if you visualize us as a bird, with man and women as two different wings.
Yes.
Would you want to fly through life with one wing half tied behind your back? So let's just unleash both wings and be able to fly as humanity.
Yeah, that's a powerful imagery.
Sangeeta, may I borrow that metaphor? Metaphor?
Anytime.
Yeah, that's such a powerful imagery, Rekha. And I was just instantly, I could visualize that bird, and you have that one wing tied back. Rekha, I'm actually going to ask you my next question, which is very interestingly about upskilling that you spoke about. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we discovered post-pandemic is that yes, more number of women have lost jobs because of the pandemic. There is statistics which proves that across the levels. It's not just at any specific industry or anything. It's across levels, across all types of workers, blue collars, white collar, everything put together. And one of the key differentiators, accelerators to the development of women's careers is upskilling. Because in most cases, what's happening is women are in the lower order skills. You have the middle order skills, you have the higher order skills, and you have the lower order skills. And the lower order skills, if you have more women there, they are at the disposable front line of any economic chaos. And they are the first ones to go. And in fact, one of the things that we at Avatar are currently doing is we have this, upskilling project called DigiPivot. And, it's amazing the way we are, looking at second career women coming in and, wanting to upskill themselves. And I know that at Vahini, at Accenture, there is a lot that's happening by way of this upskilling. I wanted to ask you, Rekha, what do you think women should focus on? Should they upskill themselves in their own domain, or should they actually do it by moving out completely into something else, which is the flavor of the season?
Okay. So again, when you ask questions, there are multiple.
I'm so sorry. I'm trying to get you guys.
That's fine. Let's first answer just the first one, which was the Accenture question, because that's the easy one. So Absolutely. I mean, we are investing so heavily in skilling because we are saying this will make a huge difference. It's not just for our women. I have to say that for all our people. We want to make a big difference.
Yes.
We've committed to spend about $1 billion globally on skilling. Just last year in India, we did about 2.2 million hours of training. Why? Because you're saying we have to learn new skills or we have to upskill, right? To stay relevant. On the broader environment, I cannot agree with you more. If there's one big issue that's going to hold India back in terms of employment and therefore hold us all socioeconomically back, is going to be the lack of good skills, the lack of relevant skills. I mean, if you see, I talked about different industries that are growing, new avenues that are opening up.
Yes.
But there's a shortage of good skills. I mean, just in my industry, in technology, for example, the current skill gap is about 8 times what's available.
Oh, God.
That gives you just the size of the pie, right? Then I just have to move to adjacent industry. I can't speak for Sangeeta. She'd know better, but healthcare right now is booming, right? Where is the skill set for it? The trained skill set that's needed for the future. So skilling is a big issue. And it needs a concerted effort, not just from private organizations, which are doing what they need to do for themselves, from the education system, from government, from private players, from not-for-profits, all of them put together. So let me give you one example and then I'll shut up. But I can go on skilling because it's a huge issue. We've set up at NASSCOM, where I'm the vice chair, we've set up something called Future Skills. And it was set up to provide technical training and modules in technology for our own member companies. 2 to 3 months ago, at the request of the government, we rolled out Future Skills Prime, which is really opening up to professionals and students across India and teaching them in digital skills, right? Because we all need it, whether it's at the beginning of the spectrum or at the higher end technology skills.
Absolutely.
So we need more efforts like that. We need modular skilling. We need to change our education system. But beyond that, we need continuous skilling and upskilling.
So I'm just going to add one thing. Besides the fact that, I think it was estimated that about 160 million women need to transition their skills from their current occupation. But I want to once again highlight that we need to do this because if we don't, then this not just the skill gap, but the wage gap will continue.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And therefore, we're going to have more problems about that. That is one. The second thing is that this is again the potential to multitask, to work from home, to have flexi jobs. The whole knowledge economy is lending us this powerful opportunity.
Yes.
I just urge, everybody to take it, women to take it. So because this is our chance, this is our moment. It's no longer about physical. It is about the intellect, and women can excel. So, and adding that skill is a critical one. And Rekha, I want to tell you that Apollo is signing up to do your NASSCOM course. So it's getting launched sometime in the next 10 days so that our team is digitally skilled. And I look forward to seeing nurses who work hard physically for 10, 15 years, evolve into, knowledge workers in the healthcare space because they've learned these digital skills.
Oh, that's such a beautiful vision. Yes.
Yeah. So there are lots of these that we're working on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So quickly.
Yeah. Yes,
Rekha. At all levels. I mean, even all of us have to continue.
Oh, yes.
Continuous learners, right? And just, I want to bring the downside to the fact that the women are being provided this opportunity to work from home, and therefore both can cash in on the opportunity. One, because you can work part-time, there's gig economy is actually growing, right? And you can be in a tier 2, tier 3 city and no longer have to, come to a metro to get a job.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But the downside, which we all need to be careful about and understand, is that they are having to do 2 jobs because the cultural norm still is that you work from home, but you also do all the work at home, right? And they are still the primary caregivers. And that is something we all need to discuss.
Absolutely. And Rekha, in fact, when you mentioned that, I'm reminded of what Sangeeta was just speaking about, the gender pay gap. But Sangeeta, a larger challenge is the gender chore gap. The fact that women really bear the biggest brunt of every type of chore that is there in the home, whether it's cooking, cleaning, caregiving, if it, even when we are speaking about elder care and child care, all of these things, they definitely are really held against women. And I want to share a very brief anecdote. I was recently at a tier 2 town, and I was talking to the owner of a bakery. And he employs about 45 people. Every single one of them is a man. He doesn't have any women there. And, just out of sort of conversationally, out of curiosity, I just asked him, I don't see any women, here, any particular reason. And then he said, I don't employ women because, first of all, they go off on maternity leave. They go off on maternity. It's not even a leave. They go off on maternity. And secondly, and he says this, and I'm quoting him, secondly, a man makes a better employee simply because that means that I'm, supporting a breadwinner of a home. So this picture of, first of all, women going off into childbearing, which is kind of a big disruption, and something that is held as a penalty against them forever. And the second part, which is that even today, the stereotype is only that of the man who is the breadwinner. This was very deeply sort of disturbing to me. And unless the second tier, third tier towns and cities become sensitized, it's going to be a huge challenge to visualize a developed India which has fully leveraged the power of women's workforce participation. So my question actually, back to you, Sangeeta, is small and medium enterprises like this, what can we do to encourage them to employ more women and to be more gender inclusive?
So, Parity, let me begin by saying that there are so many wonderful examples. You spoke about a bakery in Chennai. There's a store called Grand Sweets, which is very well known.
Yes.
And they employ only women, and they have the most fantastic products. And we use them almost as a default option, definitely because, we do feel that little bit of connect because of their women focus.
True.
But I think it's not a single answer. It's a series of things. Women, empowerment, flexibility, policies of the government. But also, we are talking a lot about a shorter lens of solutioning. 3-year, 5-year, 7-year. McKinsey study also was that shorter lens, where they said that women can add about 770 billion by the year 2025 to the GDP, short lens. Women have the power to influence also the 1 to 2 decade lens, because we are the one bringing up our children.
Yeah.
So if you change the mindset of the boys, if you change the mindset of the girls in the family and in the community, you will begin to make those significant steps. So I think that we have to keep an equal lens. We are a society of instant gratification, but before we know it, 2 decades are going to be over. So let's start investing in the mindset of our children.
That's a fantastic positive note on which I'm going to pivot to very personal questions to both of you. I'm privileged to have such amazing role model, rock star women on this conversation. And Rekha, your career trajectory has been simply amazing. An entrepreneur, a successful businesswoman who then pivots to become a professional manager, and then who goes on to lead an organization which is just creating tremendous impact. Rekha, what would you like to share with our women viewers in terms of remaining consistent and committed to that career journey?
Okay.
I hope it's just one question this time.
It is one question. So I'll give you a short answer. I would say first is take charge of your own destiny. Don't let somebody else decide your destiny. So And in that, build a plan for your own career, but then be comfortable and stay agile with changes that will happen. Life will happen, right? So be agile about that. Second, keep learning. You have to be a continuous learner, right? Whether it's in your space or adjacent space. And that allows you to reinvent yourself. As new opportunities arise, you can, grab them. Third would be take some risks, take on challenging assignments, try new areas, step out of your comfort zone. You may fail, but that's fine. You learn from it, right? And I'm just reflecting back on my journey, and these are my lessons.
Oh.
Fourth would be negotiate. Negotiate your spaces at home and negotiate your space at work. We don't do enough of that, right? And without the support, without a support, I'm not just talking about a support system, but overall support at both spaces, we can't succeed. And the last would be an ask for all the professional women, which is really lift as you rise, make a difference in the life of at least one more woman around you, and help her in her journey. Those would be mine.
Wow, beautiful. And I'm now going to go right across to Sangeeta, who's had again a stellar career. And Sangeeta, I was going through your profile and I was just amazed at not just the sheer, investment in your career and in your personal development that you have shown consistently, but to see the fact that there are so many global forums in which you are, you're being the Indian out there who is actually, creating that voice from India. That was so amazing for me to see. Sangeeta, your career model has been a combination of entrepreneurship, taking on the family mantle, and yet being an industry leader. What would you say are your kind of learnings out of your career, which you can share with our viewers?
So for me, I think the simple thing is, and I just want to say that it's important to have a meaning or a purpose in life.
Yeah.
And that purpose doesn't necessarily mean, you love your job or, you're earning more than XYZ. So this is something that and I think the reality of life is very different for different women. India is so many Indias.
Uh-huh.
So what I do say to the educated and, privileged women who've had an opportunity to have an education, that this is something that's been given and you can't afford to squander it. So whether you have a professional job or whatever, you cannot leave the world without having made some impact. And I totally agree with what Rekha said. It's one of our ethos at the Greater 50 that each one lift at least one. So you need not have a professional job to make impact on society. Speak out, help, even if it's help your maidservant understand that she has a right in so many ways. So there are many different things. So I think it's this passion to leave behind something of worth, to help people, irrespective of gender. I think I would have done many of the things that I did, and many of them which are not so well known. But just because they make me feel good, they make me feel that there's a purpose in life. The other one I would add is that, either the negotiation or the taking control of your life, many of these don't happen at the cost of your femininity. So sometimes we have to break some of these stereotypes. So be, not just brave, but have the fun of building your own stereotype, and then the life will follow. So
Absolutely.
First, win it in your mind. That is one more.
Oh.
And then finally, I think that don't just this thing for women for the sake of women. Strongly believe, and I believe that an inclusive world is a better world, a better society for all, for the men and the women, for the girls and the boys.
Yes.
That we're building this better world together. And that's why we stand up for women.
Beautifully said, beautifully said. And in fact, as I'm hearing you, I'm just going to appeal to all our viewers over here, fabulous women. The most patriotic thing that you could do this International Women's Day would be to ensure that you fully utilize your education and lift people as you come. So great points that I took from you. I mean, fantastic conversation. I'm now at the, almost at the end of the of our little fireside chat, and I'm going to have rapid fire questions to each of you. So the way we play this is, I will mention a word, and you just have to say the first thing that comes into your mind when I say that word. And if in case it's not just one word response that you can give me, if you have to explain yourself a bit, I'll give you a few seconds for you to explain. But that's about it. Okay, Rekha, I'm going to go with you now. So my rapid fire.
The same questions.
Yes, I'm going to ask you both the same questions. I'm going to ask you both. So probably Sangeeta will have a little bit of an edge.
That's not fair. No. So what you have to do is ask me a question, then go next question to Sangeeta.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to do that.
Equity in everything.
Yes, I was just going to say that. This is an equitable conversation.
Yes.
Okay, so Rekha, my first question to you, your greatest enabler.
My parents.
Fantastic. Sangeeta?
I think my positivity.
Oh, lovely. Fantastic. Now, Sangeeta, the rapid fire question to you. Your greatest mentor?
So there it's my parents, my sisters, my colleagues, my husband, and now even my kids. The world at large, there's so many lessons out there. From a book, from an auto driver, from the... I learned the other day something so special. Sorry, you can but really from the lady who cleans the office.
Yes.
So there's so many lessons out there. So my mentors are many, depending on your stage in life or where you are or what mood you're in that day. But the biggest thing is to keep your mind open, to keep learning.
Absolutely. Open yourself
keep
to
receiving,
learn.
Because
yes.
Even a superpower is helping us receive. So,
absolutely. Great. Rekha, your greatest mentor?
Similarly, many different people and things in life. Okay. Many different people and experiences in life that have taught me at different stages in life and have appeared when I needed them. So it's not one. And the only thing is to stay open and stay open to learning from anybody and everything.
Oh, lovely. Seek and the master shall appear. I think that's what this seems. You just have to ask and you have to be open and it comes. Now, Rekha, my rapid fire question to you, your passion.
Life itself.
Oh, beautiful. Fantastic. Sangeeta, your passion.
Humanity at large.
Oh, lovely. Oh my God. Okay, I wish I had more rapid fire questions now. Sangeeta, final rapid fire question to you. When I say these words, what comes to your mind? And the words are women's careers.
So much to do and so worth doing it.
Okay, absolutely. Rekha, women's careers.
So first, I agree with Sangeeta, so much to do and so worth doing it. But first thing that comes to my mind is actually, yes. If they want careers, they can have it.
Fantastic. And that's a wrap. My dear viewers, we are at the end of this fantastic conversation. I had an absolute ball. I'm sure you all enjoyed it too, with two firebrand women, leaders, not just in their own industries, but also industry bodies, thought shapers that we've had on this conversation. And I hope you take away as much as I did, having this conversation with them. Once again, a very happy International Women's Day to each of you out there. Men, women, children, boys and girls, have fun. Thank you.
Happy Women's Day to all your viewers, and it really was a lovely conversation. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you.
Thank you. That's incredible. Yes, we must all commit ourselves to building an enabling culture and forge women's empowerment. And that's the perfect note for us to end our morning session. We will be back. But before you leave, let me remind you to visit the Resource Center on this platform. There's a lot more exciting content over there. You can find content on culture makers and accelerating gender equality. Also, don't forget to click your photos at the virtual photo booth and upload those photos onto social media. Don't forget to use the hashtags that are already trending. There's hashtag IWD 2021, that's International Women's Day 2021, and hashtag Let There Be Change. Also, a recording of this entire event will be available on Accenture's social channels right after this event. Please do spread the word. This is Darai Sinawala signing off, saying thank you. I will see you again at 5 p.m. sharp today for the evening session. Don't miss it. We're going to have some incredible insights coming in from India and around the world.
The largest ever widespread health crisis has unfolded across the world.
The current times have challenged and changed us in many ways.
And like many other things, we also view equality differently.
The global pandemic has eroded hard-won progress on gender equality, but has also presented to us an opportunity to reset.
A failure to act now could set us back by 50 years.
It's time we all perceive gender on a spectrum and not as two opposing sets of ideas.
Today, an organization that recognizes the culture of equality grows at twice the pace.
It's not just about our commitment to accelerate equality, it's about choosing to take action.
To make equality matter at every conversation at the table.
To design policies that are family-friendly and gender-bias-free.
And if it's true that equality is the need of the hour, then we must and we should make it our culture.
I commit to creating an environment that's built on trust, that's built on respect, so that all of us together can flourish.
I commit to creating a culture that drives transformation.
A culture that drives innovation.
I recognize my responsibility to make this world a better place.
I am accountable for the coming generation, to give them a world that inspires them, empowers them, a place of equality.
Join me.
Join us.
Let's take action.
One step at a time.
That is how change happens.
Let the change begin with you.
Workplace without women? No.
No. I can't even start to imagine something like that.
I'm not sure of the vibe of such a place.
I think the workplace would be incomplete,
Devoid of content, creativity,
and color.
Definitely has come a long way with more opportunities for every gender, I feel, but definitely needs to be put on an improvement plan.
We have taken great strides towards gender equality. Women are out there and much more independent than ever before.
And I think this is a very positive shift because there are women who are now actively contributing to science and technology in the country.
Definitely better than what it used to be 10 years ago. Women are bolder and more independent now.
However, there's a long way to go.
Especially in the economically weaker section.
From gender representation to talking gender equality, we have come a long, hard way.
Yes, many. In fact, they've all been hustlers who led by example. They brought their best self to work always, mind, body and soul. In a sense, they were like true boss ladies.
Women leaders are strategic, they are logical, yet they're high on emotional quotient, which makes them a people's person.
The best part is she leads by example.
They knew exactly how to get best out of me.
You know, the women have a side, the caring and empathetic side, I should say, with them.
Their sensitivity, adaptability, and dynamism are few things that have possibly influenced me.
Gender diversity leads to diverse ideas, which triggers innovation.
Well, a gender diverse team would be a lot more welcoming to its new team members.
Having a diverse work culture helps to boost the morale of the team. And it would also make people more confident to voice their comments and ideas.
You need to have a gender balanced work teams because they definitely are more progressive in nature.
Well, there are many factors, and a few that come to my mind are like the motherhood penalty,
uneven access to education,
or the lack of awareness,
the sheer inequality of expectations,
the bias and indoctrination that we have grown up with, and this subconsciously manifests while we are trying to interact with people from diverse backgrounds.
The mindset of a man being a primary bread earner, there has to be a more equitable distribution of responsibility, which will help improve gender equality.
Working shouldn't be the woman's privilege. It should be her freedom.
If the products and services are consumed by all the genders, then why should we leave decision making to just one?
Well, just as we need the yin and the yang, the same way we need the women to balance the society.
They often come up with completely different sort of ideas, methods.
A different approach to problem solving.
If women are equal contributors to our society, then there's no looking back.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. This is the second of two sessions. We've already had a very thought-provoking and inspiring conversation in the morning. Information there has already started trending on social media, which is wonderful. A reminder to everyone to please check out the resource center on this platform where you can find some exciting content. Don't forget to use our virtual photo booth, click some selfies, post that. Don't forget to use the hashtag IWD 2021, which is International Women's Day 2021. And very importantly, the hashtag Let There Be Change. Now, after the morning's exciting session, let's learn about how we can design gender bias out of the workplace. And joining us is a phenomenal woman all the way from the US. Please put your hands together for Sarah Sanford. She's the founder of Gender Equity Now. She's the architect behind the GEN certification, the first gold standard for gender equity in US businesses. She's also a guest faculty member at the University of Washington School of Information, where she teaches a graduate level course on using research to drive ethical, data-backed decision-making in businesses. Sarah goes beyond vanity metrics to identify the cultural levers that businesses can adjust to counter the impact of bias. She's guided by an incredible maxim: you get the behavior that you measure. And she believes we now have the tools required for all businesses to be equity-centered if they choose to be. So let's hear it from Sarah Sanford directly.
I'm Sarah Sanford, and I'm the Executive Director of GEN. I am so excited and honored to be joining you all here today, and want to thank the leadership team at Accenture for committing to International Women's Day, not just today, but by upholding its promise for the rest of the year. I'm really excited to see the example that you're going to set for other businesses in the industry. So thank you again for taking the time to let me join you today. 9 years ago, I left my nonprofit job and had my first interview for a position in the corporate sector. The staffing agency said that I would only interview with the woman who was potentially going to become my boss. But during the interview, this tall, broad-shouldered man enters the room and asks to steal me for a second. He pulled me into what appeared to be a broom closet and asked me if I had plans to have kids anytime soon. I stuttered, no, sir. And he said, good, because the last thing we need around here is another mother. I said nothing. I got the job. The man who pulled me into the broom closet was the company president. I said nothing because I knew somehow that I was a guest in a place that wasn't meant for me. The word feminist was still an accusation then, but today it's the opening salvo of Super Bowl halftime shows. If I'm not talking about gender, I'm overhearing somebody who is. Now, opportunities for women have increased over the last 50 years, but over the last decade, progress has stalled. Here in the US, experts had previously identified 2059 as the year that the pay gap would close. But in September of last year, experts announced that we'll have to readjust our expectations to the year 2119. And that's just the wait for white women in the US. And in India, we've seen women's advancement slow in the workplace and in some cases regress. While 34% of working age women in India were in the workforce in 1999, that number dropped to 27% by 2011 and 19% today. Globally, COVID has undone decades of economic progress for women and girls, widening a wealth gap that will take generations to close. For this reason, the recession has commonly been called the she-cession. Now, the good news is that India is on the brink of a huge opportunity to change the story of women at work internationally. Even though women are underrepresented in your own workforce, over half of college graduates are women. They make up 69% of those holding master's degrees, and 41% of PhDs in India are women. With India poised to become the world's most populous country by 2050, any move that you make towards gender equality ripples out to the rest of the world. But rewriting this story doesn't just mean adding more women to the room to get better numbers. A lot of times in my work, when I talk with companies about having a more diverse, gender-balanced workforce, they say that they're afraid they'll have to lower their bar to get a more diverse workforce. I don't believe that this is true. You don't have to lower your bar to include women in the workplace. You just have to find out where you're unintentionally excluding them, where systemic bias is keeping their value from being seen. Now, what do I mean by that? How does bias get in the way of us seeing women's value? Well, let's take a quick look at this example. In a study published by Live Science, researchers found that female computer programmers tend to produce better code than men on average, but are perceived as worse if their gender is known. Female programmers around the world who anonymously submitted code to a publicly available platform known as GitHub had their work accepted more often than men did. But that changed if other users knew that the person behind the code was a woman. Perhaps more relevant to understanding what it's going to take for women to advance in organizations, let's look at this common criticism that it's really up to women to advocate for themselves more, that we're not asking enough, that we're not negotiating on our own behalf enough. But what happens when women do that? Well, let's look at one case study. Meet Howard Roizen. Howard is a venture capitalist, a former entrepreneur, and a proficient networker. Every year in business schools, there is a case study taught in which students learn Howard's story. They learn about how he rose to success. So these students read about how he co-founded a very successful tech company and then became an executive at Apple and turned his attention to venture capitalism. He eventually became a board member of several prestigious organizations and maintains one of the most extensive networks in Silicon Valley. After studying this case, business students were asked to evaluate Howard's performance. They rated him as highly competent and effective. They also said that they liked him and would like to work with him. He was seen as self-confident and someone you'd want to work with. But Howard does not actually exist. His real name is Heidi. He is a woman. And when studying the absolutely identical case, the exact same story, but with the protagonist being female, students find Heidi as competent as Howard, but they no longer like or want to work with her. Many business schools have since run this experiment, using it as a tool to help students experience unconscious bias and understand it better. Afterwards, the students realize that the prototypical leader in their unconscious mind is male. Heidi does not look or act the part. She cannot be competent and likable at the same time. What is celebrated as entrepreneurship, self-confidence, and vision in a man is perceived as arrogance, aggression, and selfishness in a woman. This means that if we don't end up confronting our unconscious biases head-on, we end up leaving women out. Now, why does that matter? Well, let's look at businesses the way that we look at ecosystems for a moment. I'm guessing if there are any environmentalists in the audience, they'll know that the number one indicator of a healthy ecosystem is biodiversity. It turns out the same holds true for our businesses. Following the recession of 2008, international companies that were the most diverse, that had at least 30% women in top management, bounced back more quickly following the crisis and continued to outperform their competitors. We can't reach 100% of our goals by only including 50% of our people. Having a more diverse workforce brings us closer to becoming true meritocracies. To break the inertia, we need to design bias out of our workplace and equity in. Now, how do we do that? How do we create systemic change? We need to start with small systemic tweaks that we refer to as cultural levers. Today, I'm going to share some of these cultural levers that you can adjust to help debias your workplace. Even if you're not a senior member of your organization or in human resources or in a hiring role, you have a role to play. Diversity and inclusion isn't just one person's job. It's part of everyone's role. Diversity and inclusion are leadership skills. So in our first example, let's look at recruiting. In India, you're looking at having more women participate in the workforce. How do you get them in the door of your company? Well, for many companies, women are underrepresented because they're just not applying to those companies. This is a very common problem that we see, especially in tech. Many of them are taking random guesses of what will bring women in. They put a lot of money into marketing campaigns that they think are more feminine branded. They go visit women's colleges. It costs a lot less to do a few other things that are a lot more effective. For one, the longer a job description is, the more likely women are to apply. Now, obviously, this is a limit. You don't want a job description the length of a book, but there is a correlation between how long a job description is and the likelihood that women will apply. A different level of risk aversion means that the more information women have, the more likely they are to feel that they're making a sound decision. In addition, posting the number of people who have applied to a job position has a similar impact. It's another way of letting women know it's worth their time and effort to apply. So on several hiring platforms, they'll let you share how many people have applied to that role. Go ahead and select that option and share with people how many people have applied and see your number of women applicants go up. And finally, audit your job descriptions for biased language. Now, this isn't as simple as making sure you're not using blatantly sexist words. It can be a lot more subtle than that. So some language is more likely to appeal to male audiences and female audiences. For example, tech companies had a huge breakthrough in the number of women applicants they received when they changed the title of job positions from hacker to coder. Women were much more likely to apply to a job advertised for a coder than they were for a hacker. So a lot of companies thought they were being funny by calling their job openings positions for hackers, but it really was keeping a lot of women from applying. Some employers received 500% more applications from women after making this one small change. Now, once women are in your organization, what can you do to ensure an equitable environment and close opportunity gaps? One important choice that employers can make is not allowing self-evaluations to influence pay or promotions decisions. While women are likely to understate their accomplishments and ask for less, men are more likely to brag about their accomplishments and ask for more. These are both things that we've culturally been taught to do. Now, depending on how self-evaluations are handled, this can have a really big impact on pay. If I'm a manager and I have $10,000 in pay increases to assign, and I get one statement from a woman who says, I think I've done fine, I'll take whatever the adjustment is. And then I get another statement from a man that says, I've had an incredible year, I deserve a $7,000 pay raise. I may be influenced by their own biased self-assessments, or I just don't want to argue with them. So I end up giving $7,000 to the man and $3,000 to the woman. Now, when this happens over and over and over again, over time, this can compound the pay gap to create a huge wealth gap that extends beyond business into our society. So we really recommend here at Gen that you only use self-evaluations for learning and development purposes, and that they shouldn't influence pay decisions. And finally, if you truly want to hear from everyone at work, institute a pause in meetings when asking for feedback. Research shows that if people in a group are asked a question, men will raise their hands in general more quickly than women. Now, this doesn't mean that women have nothing to offer or nothing to say, but they tend to take longer to consider more factors and more information. If you want to benefit from the collective intelligence of a diverse group, of all those people that you've recruited in who have diverse insights, institute a new rule. Say, I'm going to ask an important question, and I don't want anyone to raise their hands for a full minute. After a minute, I will ask for feedback. If you do this, you are far more likely to actually hear from everyone in the room, get new ideas, get new input, and we see this lead to more patents, to more innovation, and more ideas that create products that really appeal to a more diverse consumer base. This is what going beyond diversity to true inclusion looks like. I said yes to speaking at Accenture's International Women's Day event because of the respect that I have for the standard that you've set for your own gender equity initiatives. For the women listening today that are struggling to get into businesses or to stay in jobs that they already have, there is a younger generation watching us. And our research shows that when girls see women in positions of power, they feel more confident that they themselves could become leaders. And boys become more accepting of women in leadership roles. Parents who have female leaders or bosses in the workplace are more likely to want their daughters to stay in school past secondary school and to want them to have full careers for themselves. Businesses with more women in charge commit fewer environmental infractions and are less likely to be sued by their employees. Gender balanced businesses help us create a more sustainable and ethical world to live in. So for the businesses and women and allies I'm speaking to today, I ask you to choose to challenge yourself, to keep your own standard high and raise the bar for all of us. Thank you again for your time. I hope you continue to carry the promise of International Women's Day with you every day. Thank you again.
Thank you for sharing these insights with us, Sarah. It's incredible. It's our choice. If we want to be, we can be equity-centered. This brings us to the last session of the day. Women's participation in IT in India is higher, both in comparison to other sectors in the country and in comparison to representation in the sector in other countries, which is good news. However, this is not indicative of women's overall participation in the workforce in India. The ILO has forecast that even by 2030, India will not have as many working women as it did in 2005. That's 15 years ago. And this is all despite a 44% increase in its female working age population. We should also note that according to the World Economic Forum's 2020 Gender Gap report, it is going to take us 257 years to achieve economic gender parity. That's more than 10 generations of women. All this shows us the size of this gargantuan task that we all have at hand. Businesses and governments should target gender equality as one of the most promising pathways towards a faster, brighter, more equitable future. And to tell us all about this, please put your hands together for Ruma Kishore, IT Director at Unilever, Dipali Goenka, CEO and Joint MD at Wellspun India, Varsha Singh, Vice President, BP, GPS, HR and India Operations, Preksha Kaparwan, co-founder and chief marketing officer at Alpha AI Incorporated, along with Mahesh Zurale, senior managing director and lead Accenture's Advanced Technology Centers in India. I'd also like to invite once again Meenu Shekhar. We remember her from the amazing session she did with us this morning. We know that she's a senior business journalist, editorial consultant, writer, 30 years of experience, all-round amazing woman. She's going to be the moderator for this session. Please take it away, ma'am.
Hello and welcome back. To continue our discussion on accelerating gender equality for all, I have with me today a panel of very eminent business leaders. Each of them comes with their own interesting journeys and interesting experiences. A very warm welcome to Dipali Goenka, CEO of Wellspun, Ruma Kishore, IT Director at Unilever, Varsha Singh, Vice President India, BP Global Business Services, Preksha Kaparwan, co-founder and chief marketing officer at Alpha AI, and Mahesh Zurale, senior managing director, Advanced Technology Centers for Accenture in India. Thank you all very much once again for taking out time and for sharing your views and insights on how we can move the needle forward when it comes to gender parity in India and in the world. We hope that India will also lead the way for the world. So to begin with, I would request Dipali, if you could share your observations on what are some of the new challenges that the pandemic has thrown up, especially for women, when it comes to gender parity.
So, Meenu, while everybody started working from home, and a lot of women did also. So while, I would say the challenges, but there's an opportunity as well within that challenge as well. So while when she worked from home, lot of instances she would have to take care of the house, the children, and as well as the work. So she couldn't really depute time to that. That was something that I saw. Lot of women were also let go, and their livelihoods were at risk. So those are the challenges that we saw. But I think within this opportunity, there was an opportunity too. For me, and I think if it is applicable to a lot of women at Wellspun as well, they could actually work from home. They could allocate time responsibly. The time that they were commuting back to home and back to work, coming to work, got actually well proportioned, and they could spend more time constructively as well. So I think that's what I definitely saw, Meenu. And going forward as well, I think the new world trend will be like people will partially work from home as well. So definitely that's what we go forward.
Varsha, let me come to you now. You've been in senior positions in several multinational companies. Do you see a concerted effort now, in a concerted focus at the global level to focus on gender equality, given the new challenges that we have now?
Yeah, absolutely, Meenu. So I think, the pandemic really threw us at the deep end. And global organizations certainly faced the impact of that. But I think what became really apparent very quickly was that the impact on women was actually disproportionate in the new and remote working environment as, companies shifted 100% of the workload. And I think Dipali also pointed out that women were the primary caregivers. Women also had to manage homeschooling for their children who were, transitioning into an online environment. And therefore, there was a disproportionate share of pressure that women faced. I think global organizations like BP were very quick to respond in terms of first and foremost recognizing the impact. So they recognized very early that women were disproportionately pressurized under this environment. How did they respond? They responded very quickly by having a dialogue and an open discussion in terms of how do we need to respond to this change? What kind of, flexibility do we need to provide to our female colleagues? And then also an increased focus on mental well-being. So I think, recognizing that there is a difference, creating a dialogue in terms of, finding solutions and also offering support. And there were very practical things like looking at work schedules across time zones to see when people need to devote time during lunch hour, or if they had responsibilities for elderly care, providing, the colleagues with that flexibility. That was how, many of the organizations responded. And I can certainly say for BP as well as my past employer that they did recognize this.
You would say that there has been an extra focus during the pandemic.
Absolutely. And I think, just recognizing that there was a difference on the impact of the pandemic on the genders kind of ensured that there were extra steps that were taken to ensure that the women colleagues were feeling, the support that they needed to relieve this pressure.
Ruma, what has your experience been? A lot of companies talk about gender parity. They advocate gender parity both within the company, outside the company also. Do you find, has the engagement changed in any manner during these very challenging times?
So, the first thing I would like to frame is that, yes, it has changed. The headline I would say is greater awareness of the whole that we bring as human beings. We are not separate personally, officially. We are whole human beings. And I think the pandemic has only made us realize in an accelerated way how one thing impacts the other, right? And both for men and women. And that's the headline. I would say, to me, it is greater awareness of the fact that people bring their whole selves to work, whether we recognize it or don't recognize it. From the backdrop, it became a fun work. That's how I see it.
No, absolutely. I think you got it bang on. And Preksha, I'd like to come to you and ask you to give us a perspective from the startup standpoint of view. The startup world is seen as being very uncertain, as unstructured and volatile. So has your experience in the startup world been any different from, some of the established firms? And as far as women in the startup world are concerned, how have they been able to cope with it? How have they been able to grow despite the challenges?
During this time, I think a lot of startups went through a very difficult time, not just women-led, but, all of them. But the good part was that some of them emerged as winner, and a lot of these women startups, which were a little missing in direction, I would say, because, while we have initiatives out there to empower female entrepreneurs, there are some bit of force is also there where they are just trying to figure out what is to be done and all. But all those that stayed afloat during pandemic, those are the ones which are the winning startups, and a very good amount of more number of startups which were female led actually got incubated and invested in. So I see this as a win.
Yeah, that's true. I think the pandemic has impacted everybody in so many different ways that it's hard to really pinpoint and, say where the impact has been. Mahesh, coming to you, the IT sector in India has seen a very, very high, significant participation from women. It's been higher than other sectors in the country. And if you look at the participation of women in IT in India, it's also higher than the participation of women in IT in other parts of the world. But we obviously still have a long way to go. From your perspective, what are the new challenges that have come up?
You're absolutely right, Meenu. We have, in IT, we really have been striving towards making it an inclusive workforce. And yes, you do see that proportion of women being higher than the other industries. But as you rightly said, there are still miles to go. At the entry level, it becomes relatively easy for us to achieve that parity or at least get very close to the parity. Having said that, I think as you go up the hierarchy, that is still not the case. As you go up towards the very senior echelons of the company, the proportion really drops. So I think we have a lot of distance to cover when it comes to providing participation in the senior management layers. In several companies and across the industry, you will find that some of the coveted roles, some of the deep expert roles, the participation of women, there's a tremendous opportunity for us to drive that upwards. you do find that there are lots of conscious and subconscious biases that exist that potentially deprive women from taking up these senior roles, these exciting roles. And in the in technology space where there is so much innovation happening, there is so much exciting stuff happening around us. At times, those subconscious biases could leave women out of those roles. So I think we have an enormous opportunity. There is realization that we need to move towards that, but we need some very concerted work on that as well.
In fact, I'll come to that point later. I have a whole separate discussion and question on the leadership part of it also. But we'll go to Preksha now. Preksha, you've had a very interesting journey. You come from Joshimath in Uttarakhand. You started your career in the hospitality industry as a sous chef. So we must all come to your home for a meal one day. And then you moved on to marketing. And then in 2015, you co-founded the artificial intelligence startup. When you look at the challenges that I'm sure you must have faced in this, in this journey of yours, and you look at the new challenges that have come up during the pandemic, what are your thoughts when you see these two different sets of challenges? And also importantly, how can women leaders pave the way forward for more women?
So, while I come from hospitality background, I realized that the disparity is greater in those roles instead of IT sector. And while I joined a startup and I started to learn a lot of things on my own, I realized that people are much more sensitive towards needs of women in startup and in IT industry as a whole, actually. Because as a chef, I realized that, people do not care about, or the management at that time did not care about the physiological differences of a woman. So while I was a chef and I had a team of 30 cooks, they were all men, and they would expect me to do similar kind of physical labor as they did, and I had to do much more just to prove that I'm capable of handling the leadership position that I was in at that point. So while the transition happened to IT, physically it became much more durable, but I think because the background was so different, I had to put in a lot of work, especially to make sure that everyone I am pitching to or I am showcasing to understands that I belong here and I have done the work which is required out of me. So the challenges in IT probably came after we started to pitch to different companies, different leaders, different investors, where I would say 5 years back, women were not seen that strongly or accepted that strongly in a leadership position. Some of you might disagree with me, but let's say that a man decides to pick something else in his career. People are a little more supportive on that part. Like if a woman says, okay, I don't want to do this, I want to do this, first thing that came from my parents were like, you should get married first and then decide whatever you want to do. Though, my father is in army and they have been very supportive, very progressive. But I think when I was 23, they took a stand. They're like, no, now that you're changing your career, you are so fickle-minded, unstable, maybe you should just first get married. So I think those challenges are what we go through at young, when people are younger, right? After college, after their first few years of job. So as someone who has a voice, I command a very good network on LinkedIn, and I feel like as someone who has a voice out there, should be able to inspire girls out there to follow something which they feel passionate about and make sure that they're independent first. And just for this, we at Alpha AI did an initiative of what we call a fellowship program, where we had first 3 batches of just girls, training them into data science. And yesterday only I got a message from one of the girls out there who got a job as a data analyst at a big firm, and she was excited about it. So I think, we who have the voice, it's our responsibility to show what can be achieved.
Absolutely, absolutely right. In fact, Dipali, coming to you, I think it was in late 2019, you wrote a piece on LinkedIn where you said that the country's economic development is very closely linked to the progress of its women. And you also wrote about a 5-point agenda, right? Could you share that with us? And also, how has that progressed? Any update on that?
That 5-point agenda was actually related to my ASSOCHAM leadership when I was there as a woman, in the women's side. But I think I still, will, go by it, because importantly, I think the important agenda was addressing sustainability and climate change, along with that improving health and nutrition of women, because that is very, very critical. Promoting women-led businesses. I think that when Preksha spoke about it, the startups also very, very critically. And of course, promoting women in STEM. That is where you see very few women, and inclusion of women at all levels, the economic empowerment. I think these were the 5 led agendas. And because importantly, if I talk about India, if you're talking about a journey towards 5 trillion GDP, and when we are talking about 90 million non-farming jobs being added to our, country, I think the contribution of women is going to be tremendous. And I think let's be cognizant of that fact, that where would that be coming in from? So at all levels, like now with me, when I run a textile organization where I have 20,000 people, I have around 25% women working at the moment. To be precise, 23%. The blue collar associates, as Mahesh pointed out, it's easier to get more women there. But I think importantly for them to hang on and stay is very, very important. So for us, we did several, programs with an NGO called Swasti to not only multitask them, to show how they can handle their work pressures, but also sensitize the men folk at home so that they can share the work. So that was important. Middle management is easier to get, but then they also fall out of work very, very easily, because when they get, they are in the family way, they drop out, and then they don't come into the, mainstream again. And of course, at the top level, there has been challenges. At Wellspun itself, I've seen that where we have been struggling to get women leaders most of the times. So I think this journey has to come in from all quarters, Meenu. I think the government has done has taken a lot of initiatives, like along with the Startup India to the Stand Up India that the government of India talked about. I think a lot of support to the women, the women entrepreneurs as well. I think that's something that we are seeing happening. So going forward, it's not just the end of the world, Meenu. I think there's a big opportunity in our country. So definitely that's going to add on. And I will just on a lighter side say, I'm connecting with Preksha, and I was smiling because my younger daughter has a startup called Cool Kanya, and it has actually provided a platform for freelancers and young girls. And it's like an opportunity where they can apply and they can work from home, and they can have an opportunity to even get rehired back again. So yeah, there are opportunities that are opening, and I think people and young people like Preksha are great examples.
That's wonderful, and all the best to your daughter, Dipali. I hope her startup really takes off and she's able to hire many more, both men and women, of course. Mahesh, do you think that this entire work from home, which has now become the norm, and we saw how the IT industry and of course practically every other sector across the world was suddenly pushed overnight, the working model changed and work from home became the norm. How do you see that unfolding? Do you see it as being an inflection point where we will see more and more women being able to enter the workforce because of a change like this?
Absolutely, it's an inflection point. We have found many different ways of working, and there are several options that perhaps we thought of being possible earlier, but had never really experimented. Now that it was thrust upon us, it became very clear that we don't have to be completely going back to the old ways of working. I think the new ways of working indeed offered lots of flexibility that our women definitely would desire, and so do men, in fact. So on one hand, you get that flexibility. We at the same time do need to realize that that for many, working from home has kind of started feeling like living in the office. So that explosion of working hours, it is critical that people learn to say no when required, and it is also important that that we at the leadership level within the companies we sensitize our people to be respectful of people's personal lives. So I think that sort of a cultural change has to be driven. But most of the conversations that I have had with our people within Accenture and outside, and many of the global surveys, you will find that we're going to be finding multiple models. So gone are the days when you'll have a single model where everybody comes to the office every given day, or the model that we have today where everybody is working pretty much from home. And in future offers us multiple options where you could be working in home for certain types of work, for another type of work, working in the office is more suitable, and there will be lots of things in between. So there's a continuum on which we can operate. So lots of options that would require some delicate planning in every industry, and depending on the local circumstances.
Varsha, would like to come to you now. Just like work from home has changed the paradigm in many ways, so has digital. In many ways, that has become made a level playing field for women. Now, BP, your business unit has recently started operations in India, and we believe that you're looking to tap into the digital pool to expand your presence here. Given that digital is in many ways new and therefore a leveling field, do you see a bigger role for women now?
Yeah, I absolutely do, Meenu. I think, from a BP standpoint, the company is going through a very large-scale transformation to transition in from an international oil company to an integrated energy company. And the whole pivot is on digital transformation. I think the GBS center that we are started here in Pune, the entire premise of this center is to be a digitally enabled agile center which impacts BP's global strategy. There's been a lot of thinking behind this center in terms of it being really a strategic asset for BP. And every person that we are hiring in the center, we are obviously evaluating for a very new mindset, which is very new to an oil company like BP. And it's very, very focused on digital. So we're really looking at the mindset to be very digital centric and very customer centric. Now, what kind of opportunity does this present to women? I think, first and foremost, we have got a strong bent in terms of, providing that gender equality right from the hiring process. So I think BP had made some headway pretty early on by establishing its goals in 2012 to say that not only for senior management roles where we will have about 30% of senior management as women, but also at the graduate level. And I think, BP has made huge strides. So currently we are trending at about 45% at the graduate entry level, which means that, it's a huge opportunity for the digital talent, the women, especially in Pune where our center started, to really apply for these roles. And given the current remote environment, I think this gives our women colleagues a lot of flexibility as well in terms of, working remotely, managing their workloads, having the accessibility to the roles that they didn't have access to before. And also, I'm really proud of the fact, I joined BP just 3 months ago, but one of the things that inspired me to join the company was this whole digital transformation that, the organization wanted to drive. And this is, also energizing a lot of young people, because the young people are coming in with a very purpose-led digital transformation. They all want to see, okay, how does this organization really impact the world that we live in, the society that we operate in? And people are connecting to the new purpose, and they're connecting to, the new mindset of the organization. So I think, for me, I'm really excited that this offers the opportunity to a lot of young talent. We have some big plans as well to ramp the center up to about 1,500 people in this year itself. And we've onboarded a lot of fantastic talent from the industry already, women. And I'm targeting definitely to have this workplace very inclusive, and keep on to the spirit that BP has in terms of providing gender equality at the workplace, something I'm passionate about. So looking forward to this.
That's wonderful to hear. Wonderful to hear that so many new opportunities are opening up across sectors. And we also touched upon leadership a little while ago. Ruma, would like to come to you and get your perspective on leadership. How does gender and personality shape our choice of leaders? And how does a leader impact the way an organization approaches gender parity? both sides of the coin.
So to me, a little bit of reflection first, looking at a number of women leaders who've spoken about their experiences in Unilever, right? Lena has, for example, become made it right to the board of Unilever, and many of the experiences that I see around of women leaders, one of the things that is standing out is that probably there are two styles of leadership that we see. And while I wouldn't say male or female, but I would call it as two styles. And the first is, a little bit assertive, confident, somebody who is outwardly probably sometimes aggressive, right? That's one kind of style and a little individualistic. And it's easy to find followers with that kind of leadership in our social cultural context. The other style of leadership, and for want of a better word, I would still call it a female style of leadership, is somebody who is consensus driven, team oriented, and maybe not as outwardly confident and aggressive, but builds the teams and creates a lot of networks. Now, coming to the point that you said on building leaders and its impact, what I'm sensing is that it is probably easier for people to associate leadership with the first style, which is the assertive, individualistic, confident kind of thing. And when it comes to choosing leaders, organizations tend to gravitate towards that style. Now, whether they choose a man or a woman depends on what style they are exhibiting, and typically they exhibit that style, right? Mm-hmm. And hence, you probably find that even in senior levels, the rise is many a times, linked to that kind of a behavior. So women who have risen have also been fairly outwardly aggressive initially. And of course, it's coming down over time with sensitization. So that's the first part of your question, which was about how, in my view, it does impact growth from an individual point of view. How does it impact the organization was your second point.
Yes.
To me, I think ultimately an organization is about people. And if people genuinely have to bring their whole selves to work, we do require leaders who are not individualistic, but really building a lot more talent and teams and more, I would say, sensitive to the whole, which we discussed in pandemic context. So I think from an organizational impact perspective, it is a little bit of a disservice if we don't identify the second style of leadership and to promote that kind of talent. We need to have that as well, because otherwise we lose out on all kinds of talent. So that's a little bit of...
Absolutely. Ruma, I'd like to stay with you for a minute and also get your thoughts on how do we accelerate, how do we get more women into the workforce itself? We've spoken about the leadership part of it, and I'll come back to all of you again to ask your views on how we can have more leaders, how we can have more women leaders. But Ruma, just to stay with you here, how do you think we can get more women into the workforce itself?
To me, the answer lies in, I think, what I heard on the panel. We have to get both men and women to be a partner in that journey, because it is a whole. So we need role models. Clearly, I've seen role models attract women in senior positions, etc. And coming to LinkedIn profiles, we spoke about it. So I do see that, right from campus days, people follow where their alumni have gone, what kind of leadership positions. So one is setting up role models helps. Second, I think sensitization of the entire task force. We did an exercise in Unilever a number of years ago on covering the whole task force, men and women, on sensitization. And to me, that was the most important part of the whole exercise, because, we can never give the right answers to a manager or to leaders to get even people. What is important is to be sensitive. So covering people through sensitization and being able to give role models are the two things that I would say as what can be done to get women more.
And I think, Mahesh, since you're the only man here, I'll say to get men as allies. As in one of the earlier sessions, we had one of our panelists telling us we really need men as allies, So I think we'll add that point too. Another ally that we can actually have is technology itself. Because at Dipali, this question is addressed to you. We spoke about digital being a leveler, technology being a leveler. Now, if you look at every industry and every company, if it needs to be successful, has to adopt technology. Without technology, there is really no going forward. And technology is new for everybody, and therefore it's a leveler. So given this reality, today's reality, can we still talk in terms of women friendly sectors or male driven sectors, or do we really need to move beyond that? Is there anything that women really can't do, and how do we move beyond that thinking?
I think fundamentally, Meenu, there's no difference, and I think important is the culture of the organization and how it embraces everybody, the diversity together, and drives it together is going to be the way forward, Meenu. And there's no that a man can do it better or a woman can do it lesser.
Yes.
I disagree completely. And I think the IQ quotient and the EQ quotient are in fact the leveler. And I think if that given the treatment and treated well, I think everybody can. For Wellspun, if I look at it, the new journey post-COVID era as well. We are looking at smart factories. We are looking at data analytics, supply chain, e-commerce, the whole acceleration of e-commerce. So we will have women at all levels, whether it's a blue-collar associate or the middle manager, or, so I think leaders there. I think for us, it's, or at the supply chain warehousing as well. My customer care at the warehouses in Ohio in America are women. So I think technology, it's all about how, as an organization, we embrace diversity. And I think everything is an outcome post that.
I think all of us here will agree completely with you, Dipali. But if you look at the startup world, and here I'll bring Preksha in, it's still a very male-driven world, isn't it? And you spoke about this earlier, that women have a lot more challenges. So how do we bring the gender balance in there? How do we get more women entrepreneurs in?
I don't know if all of you know, but recently there was a first female billionaire, the youngest billionaire, who just became, who was just announced in last couple of months, the founder of Bumble, right? She is the first self-made billionaire. Now, this is a great motivation to a lot of female entrepreneurs out there, and there are so many programs run by government, run by IIMs and institutions where they are trying to support more women. But I think it also starts at home, in their own environment, right? Where their colleagues, their family, their husbands, their brothers, sisters support them to start doing something that they really believe in, or go ahead and take those challenges that have been thrown to them. But also, as you earlier said, that digital is a great leveler, and I'm a big believer of that, because behind a laptop, behind a computer, you're not a gender, you are just an identity which is creating amazing things, and no one can deny you success in that case. So while the students at college are being given good platforms to start their own entrepreneurship journey, I have seen that a lot of women entrepreneurs are being involved in the process. But I think it is less about if women mentor you, or you are mentored by a male entrepreneur. I think it's more about keeping the journey of that student, whether male or female, going, which right now is a little affected because we are sort of focusing on distributing the gender ratio, right? So many females should be focusing towards creating something, and so many males should be focusing towards doing this, and we should have all the experts that we are calling in, we should have a proper balance. But I think it's more about nurturing the right talent at the right time. So this is just giving this is sort of robbing them of opportunity to learn more, instead of focusing on that what are your opportunities as a woman, because you are right, field is leveled right now.
Absolutely. No, I think you've made some wonderful points, and hopefully there'll be a time when we won't be having these conversations at all, sooner than later. Varsha, coming to you, what do you see as the low-hanging fruits when it comes to gender parity? What are some of the things where we can quickly and easily build parity, and also what are some of the toughest areas where you see that happening?
So I think, if I talk from a corporation point of view, there's already so much of work that has been done globally in order to bring about gender parity in organizations. So there are some very quick wins which are very well established, right? So measuring and being very transparent about your gender balance, this is one of the commitments that can easily be put together. And what is measured improves. I mean, we have enough research to prove that. So I think the first one is to be accept transparency as a commitment and be transparent about the differences and the journey that we need to make, whether it's with respect to the gender balance or whether it is with respect to things like pay parity and so on. The second, I think, would be accountability. So how do we assign accountability for gender parity? And it can't be with the HR parts of the organization. It has to be very much at the leadership level. So, a sponsorship at all levels and assigning accountability to leaders to move the needle. I think this is very well established and this has, again, very measurable outcomes. And then finally, having initiatives which can support gender equality at the workplace, whether it is, in terms of providing the support that females need, in terms of a fair environment, having a absolutely zero tolerance approach to things like harassment, discrimination, a speak up culture, which basically support a very fair working environment. I think this becomes very important in retaining talent. So, you can attract talent by the right hiring strategy, etc. But what becomes imperative is how do you retain, how do you grow, how do you develop female talent? And I think providing a fair workplace, having very, very strong policies to support that is very important. Then in terms of developing women, so I think, coaching programs, mentoring programs, these are very well established. At BP also, there is a lot of initiatives in terms of mentoring high performance, high potential women. We assign mentors and coaches to them. We have things like, business representative groups, so which are women's networks, which people have, and actually both male and female colleagues participate in this to have a dialogue in terms of, what are the issues and roadblocks that we need to encounter. So I think, there's a body of work there which can just be sort of templated and just cut and paste. Setting up a new organization, I think this was the easy part for me in terms of, putting the practices. The tough part, which was touched upon a little earlier in the conversation, is about the unconscious biases. These biases exist. Recognizing that these biases are also very tough to break. And the biases exist not just between genders, but even within genders. So I think, this is the tough part. It's well researched also that women face two types of conflict. One is the conflict in terms of, the external environment, which may be a roadblocker for their progress. And the other one is the internal conflict in terms of the confidence that they may have to approach more senior roles, in terms of, their ability to put themselves out there, for more responsibilities. And tackling these two, again, has to be done, in a very careful manner. Certainly, I think, the workplace also is a reflection of society. So I think moving the needle in the society, and then, how does private corporations also move the needle in the society and take the lead in terms of role modeling some of these practices and then, cascading it to the society.
No, thank you very much for that. In fact, Mahesh, taking off from what Varsha said in terms of role models, and you touched upon the lack of leaders in your, in one of your earlier responses. Now, when we look at the IT industry itself, like we said, the participation of women is pretty high as compared to some of the other sectors. But at the leadership level, the numbers are still low. And despite the mountain of research that we have, which talks about the benefits of having women leaders, it's still not happening. So what is your sense on how can we make that happen? Move it along the way at least.
Yeah, great point you make there. First of all, I think the leadership in every organization has a huge role to play. Leadership has to make it very clear how committed they are to driving equality at every level in the organization. And there are a lot of role models in every organization. How do we make them visible? But basically making that commitment absolutely clear. So for example, in Accenture, we have publicly committed that we will achieve a gender equal workforce by 2025, which is around the corner. Because outside you will hear how long it's going to take, but I think the leadership has the role to say that no, we're not going to let this get delayed. We want parity now. That's one. Second thing is that leadership also has to make sure that there are bold, big, visible actions taken. So if we have this noble goal, how do we get there? And as for example, Varsha was saying earlier, how do you enable women to take those senior roles? So does it mean that they need coaching and mentoring? Does it mean that they need some leadership training? It may, in technology industry, it may mean that women need to build deeper technology skills for which they need some special attention in the initial window. So we need to make that enablement happen. We touched upon the fact that women tend to drop out mid-career because of their family commitments, most likely in the middle stage of their career. We need to make sure that when that happens, and as and when they feel comfortable coming back, unfortunately, they don't find those opportunities to come back. How do we as organizations make that possible very easily? So, for example, in Accenture, we have returning mothers program. So as soon as a woman is ready to come back, we just take them back, no interview, and we make sure that they get assigned to the same level or above, not below, which at times could happen. So I think getting those visible actions out there is also critical. And the third thing is, I can't underscore enough the point that again Varsha touched upon, which is how do you get over those subconscious biases. Lot of roles are considered out of bounds because of somebody will assume that a woman might not want to take this role. As an example, we ought to make sure that we very methodically dismantle those biases, and it is seen that those actions are visible for everybody, both women and women, so that women feel a lot more confident to stake claim to those roles, and men also feel confident to put women in those very important roles. I think leadership and the whole organization has a big role to play here.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm guessing the more women leaders we have, hopefully it will be a cascading effect, and we'll see more and more women moving to the top. We've all spoken about, it's been a great discussion, and all of you have shared wonderful points, action points on how we can move the needle forward. But how do we measure the impact of these initiatives? And of course, some of these initiatives, will have very long term. The impact will come after many, many years only. But how do we know that we are on the right track? And Mahesh, to begin with you again, at Accenture, could you share some of the ways in which you measure the impact of whether your initiatives are on the right track or not?
Measuring is absolutely critical. It's the only way we will make sure that we are on track. For example, our CEO is a woman now. More than 40% of our board of directors are women. More than 25%, I think 27% to be precise, of our global management committee members are women. So we are measuring, that. Then if you look at our overall workforce in India, more than 40% of our workforce is now women. Globally, we are touching about 45%. So we know that we have to move very fast towards that gender parity by 2025 goal. Measurement is absolutely critical, and we do that very methodically, Meenu.
Okay. And Aruma, could you give us a sense of, when we look at the initiatives that are happening in India, how do they stack up against the initiatives globally? And do we also look at the socio-cultural differences when we look at some of the parameters by which we measure the impact here? And what are some of the parameters that we should be using in the Indian context?
I think the answer depends on the kind of industry and the kind of company that we work for.
Okay.
So in a company like Unilever, which is a global company, I don't think we differentiate what we measure, but the kind of interventions might change to achieve the output number, right?
Okay.
Because we in Unilever, we already achieved 50% women representation globally in all management positions. Now, when you break it down by function, by country, it will be diverse. So the answer to your question lies in, I don't think the measure itself changes, but the interventions to achieve that measure changes. In a country like India, one of the insights I have is that more women have come into the workforce, not because men took up more housework. It happened because a class of women came in to do the housework and allowed another class of women economically to do that. So I think the context is different. So the interventions in terms of the support structures, etc., need to be different. But the output metric has to be how many women are there in your management roles, in a function, and there are matrices about various things. The kind of people that we recruit, our recruitment biases, so we can really measure every aspect of it. So my simple chat, output metrics the same, interventions can change.
Yeah. So Varsha, how do you measure the impact of the various initiatives in your business unit? And again, I think you touched a little bit upon this earlier, but if you could share a bit more, do you follow BP's global parameters, or are these customized for the Indian reality?
So I think, it's a bit of both. So certainly I think where BP is today with the initiatives that they landed early on in 2012, they're already at a global workforce of 38% women. We made some promises and commitment in terms of the overall leadership percentages as well. And I think there's been a huge progress of a 46% improvement. So, more than 25% of the work of the senior management roles are now women. And 4 out of the new 12 leadership team, the top leadership team in BP is also women. So at a global context level, I think a lot of progress has been made, and we will definitely be using those 3 principles of transparency, accountability, as well as talent development as a broad principle. But recognizing that the challenges in India are different and, the kind of issues that we need to resolve. So I am localizing the initiatives in terms of what we need to do to support our women colleagues, right from the hiring stage in terms of, the agencies that we work with so that we can get the right talent, the interventions that we need to support colleagues once they join the organization. These are also very localized, very customized, and the development program. So to answer in short, we already have broad guiding principles which have been very effective globally. But there's a bit more work to be done in India, which means that in addition to the global best practices, we are actually taking additional initiatives to ensure that we get to those positions of parity.
That's very interesting, the fact that, we have the local requirements. We really need to tailor make, or we need to customize both the parameters and measurements in terms of the local reality too. Dipali, coming back to you, you have businesses across, you have different divisions in your group. Do you find that some business units are more amenable to gender parity than others? Have you seen a difference in the way your initiatives have worked across the different businesses, and why is that?
In Welspun Pipes, a pipes division that we have women engineers on the floor. And I have a women's cut and sew unit where the loader is also a woman, the driver is a woman, the security guard is a woman. For me, the day we all stop talking about women, and women prioritization, and on the day I think we become we don't celebrate the Women's Day, and we celebrate women every day. We respect women every day, creating a culture that embraces women every day with respect, the peers that respect women, the environment that she's working in respects women, is a day when I think we can talk about the impact. I think that's where I will,
Yeah. So you would say that across businesses, there is really no difference when it comes to moving the needle.
Yeah, Meenu, I would look at it like that, because I think I'm very optimistic, and I think I would look at, if we can create that kind of a world which is of equality, and that's what it should be. I mean, for me, I work in villages and communities where, I have seen that woman, if she's earning that little money in the community, her child is going to go to school. It is not applicable to a man. A man will not see to that. So I think the integral part is it starts from the bottom of the pyramid and it goes way up.
Right. Preksha, my question to you again, would like a startup perspective on this. startups typically have smaller teams. Does it make it more easy, or let me say, does it make it less difficult to both implement gender-based gender parity initiatives, and also does it make it less difficult to measure the impact of these?
I would say as a startup, it's much more easier to, overcome those biases, and it's easier to implement our gender parity initiative. In fact, we don't even call it initiative. It's just the way we are, right? With small teams, you generally want people who are best for their roles, and most startups work on technology, so for them it doesn't really make a lot of difference unless those are the startups which are into manufacturing or some kind of logistics kind of work. But I think overall for startups it's easier to achieve, and in fact it is not a out of the world thing for them. It is not something they have to really work toward. They are inherently built like this.
And we hope one day all organizations will be like that. So thank you. All of you have been, it's been a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much for all your insights. And I'm sure our viewers are going to have some very, very key takeaways from all the points that we've discussed. And we do hope that this discussion will play a significant role in accelerating gender parity and really moving the needle much faster than it would otherwise happen. Thank you once again, and lovely to have you all here.
Yes. When she rises, we all rise. Thank you, each one of you, for taking time out from your busy schedules and being part of our IWD Leaders Conversations. It's our endeavor to spark as many such conversations across the world to highlight the importance of a gender-balanced workforce, which will lead us to a more equal and more productive world. So come on, let's ensure and applaud equality for women and everyone. Let's celebrate women, not just today, but every day, because collective efforts can bring about collective change, and let there be change.